Hello and welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Harlock. On today's show, we're going to hear a panel discussion about hemp fiber agronomy and genetics. I recorded this panel discussion at the NoCo Hemp Expo in Colorado. This panel includes Rachel Berry from the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, Corbett Miteff from KonopiUS, Terry Moran from Kanda Hemp, Dr. Larry Smart from Cornell University, and the panel was moderated by Eric Singular, who I'm actually going to check in with a little bit before we hear the recording. All right, so that's the show today. We're going to first take a break for sponsor messages and a couple of nuggets of hemp news. Today's show is made possible with generous support from IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. IND Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, environmentally focused industrial hemp food and fiber company that's providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities in Montana and across the American West. Check them out at indhemp.com. Our show is also brought to you with support from Forever Green, distributors of the KP4 hemp cutter. It's a revolution in hemp harvesting. It sets a new standard for harvest quality, speed, and efficiency. The KP4 prepares hemp for ideal retting and easy on-field tedding, raking, and baling. It's easy to maintain and is designed to withstand the punishments of hemp harvesting. So check it out at hempcutter.com. And our special coverage of the NoCo Hemp Expo is brought to you with generous support from Sunray Hemp in Palmer, Alaska. Big shout out to Ray up there at 62 North. Deep gratitude to Impactful Ventures. Check them out at mpactfulventures.org. They strive to empower those making a significant impact for a sustainable future. Thank you for your support. So please go to the show page for this episode and click on the links to our sponsors and let them know that you heard about them here on the Hemp Podcast. Okay, moving on to some nuggets of hemp news. Really, the big news this week actually came out last week, and that is the USDA National Hemp Report. So I'm just going to go through some of the highlights here. According to the USDA, in 2023, the value of hemp production in the open and under protection for the U.S. totaled $291 million. That's up 18% from 2022. So industrial hemp in the open, that's planted area for the nation in 2023 for all utilizations, totaled 27,680 acres, down 2% from 2022. The value of hemp production in the open for the U.S. totaled $258 million, up 22% from last year. Area harvested for all purposes in the open totaled 21,079 acres, up 15% from 2022. So floral hemp in the open, United States floral hemp production grown in the open for 2023 was estimated at 8.03 million pounds, up 18% from 2020. The area harvested for floral hemp in the open in the U.S. was estimated at 7,383 acres, up 4% from 2022. The average yield for 2023 floral hemp in the open was estimated at 1,088 pounds per acre, up 134 pounds from last year. The value of floral hemp grown in the open totaled $241 million, up 35% from 2022. Now looking at grain hemp in the open. National production of hemp grown in the open for grain in 2023 totaled 3.11 million pounds. That's up 28% from 2022. Area harvested for hemp grown in the open for grain in the U.S. was estimated at 3,986 acres, down 26% from last season. The average yield for 2023 hemp grown in the open for grain was estimated at 779 pounds per acre, up 327 pounds from last year. The value of hemp grown in the open for grain totaled $2.31 million, down 36% from 2022. For fiber hemp in the open, In 2023, production of hemp grown in the open for fiber was estimated at 49.1 million pounds, up 133% from 2022. Area harvested for hemp grown in the open for fiber in the U.S. was estimated at 12,106 acres, up 77% from last season. The average yield for 2023 hemp grown in the open for fiber was estimated at 4,053 pounds per acre, up 983 pounds from last year. The value of hemp grown in the open for fiber totaled $11.6 million, down 59% from 2022. Seed hemp in the open. Production of hemp grown in the open for seed in 2023 was estimated at 751,000 pounds, up 414% from 2022. Area harvested for hemp grown in the open for seed in the U.S. was estimated at 1,344 acres, up 66% from last year. The average yield for 2023 hemp grown in the open for seed was estimated at 559 pounds per acre, up 379 pounds from last year. The value of hemp grown in the open for seed totaled $2.91 million, up 96% from 2022. Hemp under protection. In 2023, hemp growers used 3.24 million square feet under protection for production, down 33% from 2022. The 2023 value of hemp production under protection in the U.S. totaled $32.9 million, down 3% from last year. All right, so I'll have a link to this USDA report on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Okay, and one more nugget of hemp news this week. So a couple of weeks ago, Greg Wilson asked everybody on their show to go vote for hempwood in the coolest thing made in Kentucky contest. Well, I've got good news. Hempwood has been voted the coolest thing made in Kentucky. That's right. Hempwood is officially cooler than bourbon. Yeah, you heard it here. All right, so congratulations to Greg Wilson and the whole crew down there in Murray, Kentucky at Hempwood. This is awesome. You guys make cool stuff, and I'm proud to know you. Now, moving on to the main show. So, when I was out at the NoCo Hemp Expo, Saturday, April 13th, I was the MC of the morning session. I got to introduce Steve Groff from Lancaster County. I also introduced a few panel discussions, including this one here that was called Breaking Ground, Exploring Hemp Fiber Agronomy and Genetics. And it was moderated by Eric Singular. He's been on the show before. I've gotten to know him a bit at various hemp events. I really enjoyed talking to him. But for whatever reason, I wasn't able to record the introduction to this panel discussion, so I figured I would just call up Eric Singular and have him set it up for us. Eric Singular, welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's great to be back here.
Yeah, so on this week's show, I'm going to be running the audio of a panel discussion that you moderated out at NoCo. Was that last week already? Maybe that's 2 weeks ago. I don't know. Time is flying by now. But as luck would have it, I was not able to record the intro of the panel. I guess I wasn't fast enough to press record. So I was hoping that you would be kind enough to sort of set it up for us. And so first, tell me what the panel discussion was about there at NoCo.
Absolutely. Yeah, we delved into the intersection of agronomy and genetics as it relates to hemp fiber production.
Okay. And who was up on the panel with you?
Oh, we had some excellent panelists. We had Dr. Larry Smart from Cornell University, Terry Moran from Kanda Hemp, Rachel Berry from Illinois Hemp Growers Association, and Corbett Miteff from KonopiUS.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it was a great panel. I thought you guys discussed some important topics. For you, what were some of the highlights of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we highlighted was how variable bast and herd quality and yield is based on these two factors of genetics and agronomy, and how you need to have a lot of foresight when you're growing a fiber crop about what your target end market's going to be, or what the processor that you're growing on contract for really wants to target. Because if the processor really wants a textile grade bast or high quality bast fiber, that's going to change genetic selection. It's going to change the agronomy practices that you use, as well as harvesting practices, retting practices, all of it.
Okay. How was the NoCo conference for you overall?
It was great. It was I think we returned to NoCo's roots this year, going back to northern Colorado and up to Estes Park, which was nice. It is always fantastic to see everybody and kind of do that annual check-in with where everybody is at. And the thing that I really liked is we actually had some folks from Poland who were at the conference this year, and it's easy to get bogged down with all of the things that we still need to do. But one of the points that they highlighted was the progress that's been made in a relatively short amount of time here in the United States, and how quickly the dialogue has evolved, how quickly infrastructure has been built to handle this crop. I think that's really worth highlighting and focusing on those wins and those positives, so that we can have the momentum and energy and rejuvenation to go and then keep fighting for all the things we want to see in the future.
Right. Yeah, it's been a short time since I started doing this podcast. That's only 5.5 years ago. It feels like forever. It's changed my life, but I know it's not all about me. But everyone I talk to in that hemp space, like they talk about like hemp years or like dog years. And so, yeah, it was neat to get back to the roots, I think. But also there was something that Ed Lehrberger said, talking about where Morris Beagle started NoCo 10, 11 years ago. It was more focused on the industrial things, the fiber mostly. And then it sort of like took a spiral through cannabinoids. And this year's show I thought was greatly improved by the lack of intoxicating cannabinoids on the expo floor. This year's show I felt had more of like a industrial vibe or business vibe, or just, I don't know, something other than, 420 culture.
Definitely. Yeah. He has, the conference has been a mere reflection of the dynamics of the hemp market over the last 8 to 10 years. So it's been very interesting to watch the conference kind of meet to rise where the market is going. And it definitely delved into that cannabinoid space pretty heavy there for a couple of years. And then it's come back very much to really the planet and the impact that this plant can make, for as a climate smart crop and as a new regenerative agriculture and renewable crop tool to help us address a lot of these mounting and pressing climate factors.
Amen to that. Yeah. I thought Steve Groff's presentation on Saturday morning was fantastic. He just opens up with a great big image of the Dust Bowl, right, and goes from there.
His energy is unmatched.
Yeah. We are lucky to have him here in Pennsylvania. So let's listen to the audio of this panel discussion, and then can you stick around and we can chat a little bit afterwards?
Most definitely.
All right, cool. So I think this starts with Dr. Larry Smart from Cornell.
Since early 2017, and at that time we started a hemp breeding program. As you can guess, that breeding program has been quite a roller coaster in trying to meet the needs of the industry, but certainly right now the demand is for fiber. So we have been focused on breeding fiber hemp, and the main trait that we see as valuable in fiber hemp is very late flowering. So hemp is a photoperiodic crop. When it starts to flower, it will essentially stop growing any taller. So if we can identify varieties that continue to grow, do not transition to flowering, those are going to create the greatest amount of biomass. Where do we find these late flowering varieties? Well, They are the varieties that are adapted to tropical and subtropical latitudes. And as plant breeders, what we want to do is take material that was adapted to the south and move it north. Where's the problem in that? They are not adapted to winter. So the problem that we face in producing these very late flowering varieties in the north is that they don't make seed. They freeze before the seed is mature. So I think we've had some early successes in developing THC compliant, very late flowering fiber varieties. But our challenge right now is where can we economically produce seed of those varieties? It has to be at a southern latitude. And again, I think one of the points we're going to talk about is many growers, in order to meet processor qualifications, specifications, will want to plant at very high density. That then raises your seed cost at planting. So we need to find a way to produce seed economically of these very late flowering tropical, subtropical based varieties. So I'll stop there.
Excellent, thank you, Larry. And on this topic of late flowering varieties, Terry, I think that's a great place for you to come in and share your experience working with those late flowering varieties and maybe lend some insight, if you can, on what's been successful in terms of making seed or propagating those varieties.
Sure, thank you, Eric. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Well, I think Larry kind of spelled it out real well there. There is a dilemma with, you need a lot of seed to plant for fiber crops, and where you're going to get that seed. And producing in the U.S. has not been very successful for many reasons in a lot of areas. If you look at where the market is going and everybody that's in it, how they all say they're going to double acres every year, and where's the seed coming from? So it is a real dilemma. And on the breeding side, it's all going to come down to genetics and agronomics and what is economically feasible. And that's the most sustainable thing for the whole hemp space is it going to pay the grower? Is the grower going to make enough money? What is their input cost? What are they making? Why is it important for a grower to grow hemp? So that's taking it in a little bit different direction there, but the main thing to think about is, if you're going to get to 250,000 acres, where's that seed going to come from? And we're going to be relying on a lot of imports for a very long time if there's any growth. And even if you look at it today, there's an awful lot of seed being brought in. The majority of the seed is brought in from Europe or from China. And I don't see that changing in the near term. And even if there's some great variety out there, it's going to take several years to scale that. 3 to 5 years. You have the most beautiful variety, the greatest economic yield identified today. You're years off before it's commercialized at any kind of scale, especially if you're talking about acres doubling every year for the next 5-10 years.
Excellent points, Terry. And yes, certainly something to think about for the seed folks that are on this panel is that we always have to be making our decisions about seed needs a year at least in advance. And so when you think about these massive, we're reaching a tipping point or an inflection point for the market and for needed acres, that there really needs to be a feedback and a lot of input from that back end of the supply chain to the folks who are in seed and genetics, so that we can get that signal. And then, to Terry's point, it has to be more than just a signal to ensure that that seed is actually going to be there. There needs to be some investment made so that we can actually produce the amount of seed that would be needed to see those hundreds of thousands of acres. Rachel, moving over to you with the farm perspective, maybe you can talk about your experience growing hemp fiber varieties in Illinois and the experience of your constituents at the Illinois Hemp Growers Association.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I'm the president at the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, and I am also a hemp farmer. And I've been farming hemp since 2019, the first year that we could in Illinois. And I've been experimenting with all sorts of genetics over the years. Most of it's been trial and error on my own. I learned a lot that way. I really loved Steve's presentation. I practice regenerative growing practices myself, and that in itself is trial and error. But last year I was fortunate enough to be a participant in some research in the Midwest the full name of the Midwest Collaborative for the Hemp Research is escaping me at the moment. It's kind of a long one, but I'd be happy to Google that and share it with anybody after this. Where they presented me with some genetics that they thought would work better for me in my region, and I had amazing success with one of those varieties. Something that has been evasive to me, for over these years, and to just have the research narrowed down and to be provided, these genetics so that they're provided for me. I don't have to seek them out, and I was paid to do this research. I cannot express how much that is significant for farmers like me who want very badly to be involved in this industry, really want this to work, not just for our communities, for the farmers in the IHGA, the farmers across our country, but I want this to work for myself. I'm a small farmer, I'm a first generation farmer, and I believe that we need to go back to farming in this country, and it's not just going to be the big farmers, the 1,000-acre farms, and bigger that like we have in Illinois. It's going to be small family farmers like myself, making artisanal products, raising our cattle, raising our locally fed animals on locally fed, nutrient-dense food. I can use fiber to build on my home for my animals. I use my fiber that I grow now for mulch and animal bedding that I put all back into my fields. So having folks like you who are doing the research on these genetics and providing them to farmers like me to eliminate all that trial and error, I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you, Rachel. And thinking about this intersection of genetics and agronomy, one of the things that's become increasingly clear here in the United States as the fiber market has kind of got up and running the last couple of years is that not all fiber is created equal. And there is a very big difference between growing for herd or growing for bast. And bast fiber quality is greatly impacted and variable based on genetics, genetic selection, and also agronomy. So Corbett, coming over to you now, and I know you distribute a lot of wonderful seed varietals from Europe, and specifically from France, where a lot of really high quality bast fiber is grown. Can you talk a little bit about some of the traits, for example, that the French breeders have selected for improved fiber quality, like yellow stalk, yellow stem, as well as some of the successful agronomic practices for targeting, let's say, a high quality bast, maybe textile grade crop?
Sure, thanks Eric. So what we've been trying to concentrate on and what we've been really focusing on is how to take this fiber and how to process it. Some of the fibers can be quite stiff and quite difficult to take apart. What we've been looking over the last few years is the defibrillation of the cellulose, of the fibers. When we sort of take it apart, we sort of see these sort of long fibers of the bast fiber. But when you start breaking it down, you start looking under sort of a microscope, even sort of a electron microscope, we're realizing that there's sort of the defibrillation, and we're seeing that there's evidence of nanocellulose within the hemp fiber. And what we're trying to do is trying to create varieties and find specific traits where we can sort of defibrillation and start taking apart those long fibers and start breaking them down, because when you start looking at them, those long fibers are just made up of lots of little small tiny fibers. And I'm kind of concentrating on a lot of the pulp industry, and when we're running through these fibers, these hemp fibers, through like a valley beater, which is a tool that we use in the hemp, well not the hemp, but just in the pulp industry, sort of just breaking those down, and sort of how do we take these sort of bundles of these fibers and sort of how do we get them into these smaller bundles, and then when we run the process over again, sort of how do we break it down into nanocellulose. And that's quite a key product that we're sort of trying to tap into, and we believe that we're sort of can get this nanocellulose from the hemp fiber. But in order to do that, we have to find some genetics where we can start breaking these fibers down into sort of these smaller fibers that are sort of more or less homogeneous, and then we can start putting those into the practices, whether it be high-end molding or into the paper industry. And so The defibrillization is an important part, I think, with the genetics, but at the same time, what we're trying to do is with the hemp genetics is trying to create, Larry mentioned that we've been concentrating on fiber here, but really at the end of the day, we're trying to find things where we can get some really good fiber, that we can break apart that cellulose and start using it. But at the same time, how do we get the grain off of it? And so we're really trying to concentrate on seed shattering. And for those who don't know, we're trying to figure out how to keep that grain on the flower head. And so some of our new varieties this year, the Ostara and the Mona 16 are sort of kind of helping with that seed shatter, but also has this hemp fiber that's easily breakable into smaller fibers. So those are kind of the two sort of key genetic traits that we're looking for.
Excellent, and I think we can probably pass the conversation back down to you, Larry, as we think about this difference between Bast and herd and how we need to have a lot of foresight and forethought into what is the desired end market for the crop that we're growing. So,
yeah, again, from a breeder's perspective, we often talk about hemp as providing many different products, right? But as a plant breeder, it's challenging to breed a variety that is optimal to provide multiple products at the same time. So I think we need to think about that as an industry and whether it's really wise to start out trying to harvest multiple things at the same time and optimize all those. I'd love to talk to Steve Groff about that more. But I think there is great potential in the end to do a dual purpose grain and stem harvest. But at that point, as you've allowed the plant to go to maturity, if you have a dioecious crop, to basically allow those male plants to die and senesce, you are now shifting the quality of your stem to a herd harvest rather than a high quality bast fiber harvest. And again, I think there's a fantastic market for that. I think we do have varieties now that will yield marketable, economically viable amounts of grain and viable amounts of stem, primarily for herd. Again, as a plant breeder, I have a target vision for my crop, and maybe the engineering can't keep up with that vision. So I think we're also at a point where we need to talk to people like Steve and Andrew Bish about the best way to do that dual purpose harvest, because I don't think we have that right now. I sort of have a vision, but I'd love to talk with those guys about engineering that. I think we all need to think about, do we want a high quality textile grade fiber only? Do we want grain only? Or do we want to try to do that dual purpose grain and probably herd harvest? I think those are going to be three different cultivars.
excellent points, and also thinking about how much of each of those components make up of the plant. For example, herd to bast ratio. I mean, if you're just growing for textile grade fiber, that's a very small percentage of that overall stem or stock. But Terry, you've worked with so many farmers in so many different parts of the country and helping them get set up to grow fiber crops. So I'm sure you have some thoughts here about good practices and kind of just that intentionality and working with their processor and really understanding the contract and what the processor is looking for. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done and what you found to be successful in kind of that harmonizing between the farm and cultivation stage and the processing stage?
I think the main thing on the agronomy side and the growing, there's been a lot of crop failures in the early days of people growing hemp for any reason. I think finally people are coming around to the idea that getting a good stand, good emergence is half the battle. You got to get the crop out of the ground, and whether you want to use a herbicide or not is another story, but you're not going to have good quality fiber crop if it's full of weeds. So just basic farming practices overall to ensure that you don't have a crop that's full of weeds is most of the battle to begin with. People realizing how much seed they need to plant, people looking at your germination, your actual seed count and getting the population dialed in for what the processor is actually wanting. So that's the main thing that I see is to start out with a good crop to begin with. You got to get it out of the ground. You have to plant at the proper density, and really the only thing limiting in most of it, east to west, is going to be the amount of water you have.
Thank you, Terry. And then Rachel, coming back to you again for kind of some of that farm perspective, what have you faced personally or heard from fiber growers in Illinois or fiber growers in the Midwest as some of those largest challenges where they really are looking for help, and that whether that's help from who they're procuring seed from, or looking for that input from the processor in terms of what do they really want them to be targeting for with their fiber production?
That's a good question, and we're pretty limited on fiber processing in Illinois. Luckily, we do have one located close enough to take fiber in from growers, and that would be Tiger Fiber, who's here today. So in Illinois, mostly we're growing cannabinoids still. I'm one of a handful of farmers who are, experimenting with fiber. And the few farmers that I know that are growing fiber, they have been sending it down to Texas. They've been sending it down to Kentucky. There really aren't that many outlets for us, so it's still pretty experimental.
Very fair. Corbett, one of the things that we talked about when we were planning for this panel is asking the question, do we consider redding part of agronomy? And we had decided that yes, we do, because it's still before the crop leaves farm gate. And redding seems to be just such a pivotally important step in order to achieve, one, good and clean decortication and efficient decortication, as well as bast quality. Can you speak a little bit about some of what you're seeing on that agronomy and redding side with the customers that you're working with here in the US with the French cultivars?
Sure. So a farmer in France told me that redding is not really a science, but it's an art form. It's something that comes through experience and just kind of a lived experience. It's differently every year. It really depends on how much soil moisture you have, how much rainfall you have, and which variety you're using. The yellow varieties, sort of the non-conventional 5479, it has a lot less redding involved than some of your green plants, your sort of conventional hemp. It's much quicker. But I'm saying that I really think for the future, redding is a big problem, especially for the processors. One of the big complaints that I see is that a lot of rocks and sand and dirt will get into the fiber, into the stalk before it goes in when they're baling it. I really like the thing that Steve Groff was showing, like the blade that goes through and kind of pushed it to the side, where we don't get the power rakes into the dirt. I think sort of just keeping the fiber clean through the redding process. I'm a big believer. I think if we're going to do this on a big scale, I think that there's some people doing research on enzymes and spraying the hemp stalks with enzymes to speed up and kind of control the redding a little bit. I believe in the future we're going to see a lot more hemp being turned into using like a silage chopper or a forestry mulcher, putting into silage pits and spraying it down so the hemp actually never, when it redds, it actually never touches the ground. We can control the redding uniformly when it's in the silage pits. I know that some people, when we chop it up, they don't like those the small fibers we put it into, but it's a big learning curve. I think that one of the things that I see, especially up in Tennessee where I'm based and up in Kentucky, where I'll give the same genetic to two different farmers, 5 or 10 miles down the road, they're growing on the same soil. And you get sort of two products at the end of the day. You'll get the same genetics, but once they bale it up, it's kind of two different kinds of fiber. So I really believe that agronomy and sort of growing this and getting good fiber is 90% of our battle. I'm sort of involved with ASTM. We're trying to come up with some standardization of this. How do we get every single bale coming off the field to be the same? And then how do we get this sort of this redding all the same? Because we're sort of seeing a lot of variation, and especially from the same varieties. And so we have to kind of learn that art form and look at the science and see where it's coming from, and see why it's redding, how it's redding, what enzymes are doing. But at the same time, we have to really, it's kind of like hay, when do you bale hay? It's, a farmer can go up there and feel it and, put it in his hands and he knows it's ready. And the same thing is kind of with the redding the hemp fiber.
Perfect, and I think that we're going to have enough time to get some questions from the audience for these wonderful panelists, but I'm going to try to come down just one more time. So Larry, I think this is on the topic of redding, a good time to talk about some of that, what did we call it, interdisciplinary or kind of multi-stakeholder collaborations. And I know that there's some redding research as a result of the Hemp Research Consortium and with FAR, and maybe you can pick up a little bit there.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Eric. So we have been very fortunate. Well, I think it's a good example of how collaboration inspires investment. And early on, I had a very productive collaboration with my colleague David Suchoff at North Carolina State University and Bob Pierce at University of Kentucky. That was funded by a CBD company in North Carolina. When that project ended, the folks at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, FFAR, noticed that collaboration and said, this is a perfect foundation for building an academic industry collaborative consortium. And they invested $5 million of that money, which is federal money coming through the Farm Bill, to initiate this hemp research consortium if we could find non-federal dollars, primarily industry dollars, to match that $5 million. We have come close to that so far, but we are still seeking more industrial collaborators. And again, if you have money that you are willing to put into research and development, if you come to us and want help from academics, NC State, Kentucky, Cornell, and we subcontract with folks all across the country. I work with folks at Texas A&M, University of Florida, in addition to those other three, then we can leverage your dollars into a doubled amount of research. That project that Eric was talking about specifically at North Carolina State is in collaboration with IND Hemp and Bass Fiber Tech, and David Suchoff will work with one of their microbiologists to characterize the microbes in hemp stems as they're redding, with the exact purpose, as Corby talked about, to try to develop a microbial inoculant that can make that redding process much more uniform. International Hemp has been our largest contributor to the Hemp Research Consortium, and we're grateful to them and hope that there are more people out there willing to make a similar investment.
Thank you, Larry. Terry, I know and saw recently that you guys provided a decorticator, I believe, to North Carolina State University, so there's been some collaborative efforts there as well. Can you share a little bit about where you think those opportunities are for kind of public-private engagement and collaboration?
Sure, thank you. I think that there's a good foundation that's been laid and a good framework there, starting back with Bob Pierce with the multi-state initiative. And it's more of a matter of, is the money available, what do people want to do, and then not trying to do everything, but just really seeing what is regionally the most important thing to do. And on our side, we need to get our seed in front of as many people as we can, get the varieties out in every region that we can, and learn how to grow them and grow them properly. And that's still a learning curve for most people in most regions.
Rachel, have you found that there's been a pretty big collaborative spirit in the Midwest? And I think there has been, because there's a Midwest Research Collaborative, but where do you see some of those big opportunities in that multi-stakeholder engagement process?
Yeah, there's a lot of collaboration in the Midwest, and it's really encouraging, not just through the hemp community, farmers, advocates, business owners, but through the research through the universities. We have Dr. Carla Gage with us today, who many of you have met, who's doing really important research on weeds, making sure that these bales of fiber we have in the future are not full of weeds is really important. We have some really interesting research that we support at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Dr. D.K. Lee, he's working on mostly grain yield, but of course we know there's going to be fiber that comes along with that, and he is meticulously hand-selecting these plants and breeding them for grain yield, and everybody should be supporting, this type of research. It benefits me. The research that I mentioned earlier that I participated in, I saw my results on the research results. I was the only person who no-tilled. And to be honest, I got kind of smack talked about that. They were like, this is not going to work, this is not how we do this. And lo and behold, just a couple weeks ago at the Illinois Hemp Summit, they came up and presented some research from that collaborative. And there I am on the map that says, no-till really worked. We had severe drought last year. That variety that I grew, it grew well through drought. So support the university research. If you're not a farmer who can participate by growing the varieties, support with your dollars the research that's being done.
Excellent message and clearly well received. And I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a second, and then we are going to do this Q&A, I promise. But here in this country, when we think about a natural fiber industry, that's cotton. That's well established and very, very old. And so, not to say that hemp isn't a huge opportunity, but really there is a huge opportunity for just the development of infrastructure, whether it's genetics, agronomy, collaboration with public and private institutions for all natural fibers beyond cotton, whether that's flax, whether that's hemp, jute, kanaf, all of those deliver on what we care so much about hemp, which is this climate smart fiber and this climate smart raw material that can be manufactured into so many different uses. So it's been really encouraging, not just all these developments and progress with hemp, but then also to see new interest in other natural fibers. And before we do the Q&A, Corbett, I'll let you kind of round this off, but with your guys' working so closely with France and Western Europe, that whole model over there that works so well for hemp bast fiber, it works because they had a very well developed and robust linen industry that they never lost. They never got rid of it. And a lot of the great fiber that we see coming out of Europe is a result of that. It's the genetics, it's the agronomy, and it's the processing technology for bast fiber crops. So any kind of thoughts that you can share on that, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for any questions.
That's a good question. Let me just back up a little bit and say something about the collaboration, which I really believe in collaboration. My company, we work with close to 30 universities. I kind of tell people that I'm working with that I'm a seedsman. I sell seeds, but at the end of the day, I want the seeds to sell themselves. I believe for us for this industry to be successful, we have to find the best genetics for the best location with the highest yields. And if it's my seeds, or if it's Alex's seeds at Kanda, or Larry's seeds, or Verve seeds, I want the best seed for the best place for the best farmer. And the way that I see it is, we're at the infancy of this industry, and we've all got to collaborate, and we work together, and they all keep on saying, we want this 1 million, 2 million acres of hemp, and I'll be honest, hey, just give me 10% of that, million acres. I'm happy with 100,000. I've got a large sort of seed breeder that I work with, and hitting that 100,000 acres of stable genetics is difficult. I can do it. I'm ready to do it. Give me 20%. I'll do 200,000. But I'm gonna need collaboration from the other seed companies to come up with that other 800,000 acres. And so I really believe working with the universities, finding getting some non-biased numbers, doing the research. Let the seeds speak for themselves. But I also sort of believe in sort of collaboration with sort of like art and culture. I know what Laura Sullivan's doing at Vermont with her arts and crafts. I think that art really influences culture. If we can start kind of getting this, sort of arts and crafts, yarn being made and we start making our own clothes again, that'll kind of, sort of move the industry forward a little bit. And in terms of sort of collaboration with, flax, the Friends, they work really closely with the processors there. The processors tell them what they want, It's all about going back to the genetics, how do we take this very strong hemp fiber and how do we make it manageable? How do we break it down without breaking the machines? There's some genetics that we work with that are just so rough and we just don't really use them much because the fiber is so hard, there's so much lignin in it, and it's just, it starts breaking down the machine. So, how do we collaborate with the manufacturers who are producing the decorticators? How do we give them the traits and the genetics that they want? At the same time, how do we collaborate with the manufacturers to get them the certain specs that they want? At the same time, we're working with the researchers at the universities, because, once we start spitting out all these new genetics, what's really getting these yields. And so really for this industry, we've all got to kind of collaborate together and kind of share information, because at the end of the day, we got to start making this. We've been in this industry, for 7 years, 2018 or whatever, we haven't really made that much of a headway. We're still in the very early days, and so there's a lot of collaboration that still needs to be done.
But I really like that message that the opportunity is big enough, and it's going to require, inter-industry parts of the supply chain collaboration. All right, have at them.
For the research consortium, are you looking for seed-free money? Are you looking for private investor money? And does it matter with regard to issuing your own intellectual property rights down the road?
So the question is, what type of money are we looking for? So it can be, so it is non-federal money. It can be state money. It can be NGO money. It can be industry R&D money. It can also be that industry match can be up to 50% in-kind contribution. So as an example, we are working with a large farming company in Florida who is providing in-kind contribution by doing our cannabinoid analysis, our DNA extractions, running a field trial in Florida. All of those costs count as in-kind contribution for the matching funds. The consortium bylaws cover the aspects of intellectual property. So, if you were interested in joining the consortium, certainly the first step you would do would be to read those bylaws. They certainly protect any starting IP that you have, and then IP that's generated through the consortium. There is an organized way of providing members of the consortium first access to that IP.
Patrick, right over there.
Thanks, Eric. Patrick Itagi with the National Industrial Hemp Council. And my question is actually for each of the panelists, and in particular, a focus on Rachel. I'll pose the question so you can think about it. We hear throughout the conference, speaking to the choir, we're speaking to the choir, but are we singing off the same song sheet? So my question is, in general, is the properties of hemp truly there in terms of water use? Does it use less water? I talked to the Texas folks, they're like, well, that may not necessarily be true, just because of the way the rainfall patterns and those type of things you mentioned, drought. Rachel, and how you went through, so the genetics are important. The questions on the seed and who's in front of us, and Eric noted cotton. We're always comparing to cotton. I don't say we're not going to replace cotton, because each one has its own properties, but we can be a blend to it. We can be complementary to it. Or we can even have its own place on it. But that comparison, so we're all singing off the same song sheet. Do you feel that in comparison to cotton, because that's what we use, that hemp uses less pesticides and herbicides? Does hemp use less water? We just finished a life cycle analysis, and it was just mixed. We got funding from the USDA to do it, and we're like, well, it depends. It goes back to Steve Groff's commentary. Well, it does, but it depends. If you do it right. So that's my question. And so as you think about that, just really quickly, a couple plugs. Morris Beagle is working with us on the European Industrial Hemp Association meeting in Prague, and we're taking a delegation of U.S. companies to promote U.S. companies there later this year. And so those opportunities there, which I talked about earlier. Want to thank Corbett. He backs up what he says. He's a member of the National Industrial Hemp Council, and he's out there networking. And I just want to say thank you for backing up what you say. You put your money where your mouth is. To be blunt about it, and all the panelists up there have been really great, and Larry, and we work with everybody. But so as I meander on, let you guys have a second to think about it. And I'd like to start with you, Rachel, because really we talk to USDA and they're saying, farmers, how do we help the farmers? How do we help the farmers? So you're a farmer, you're in the trenches. Loved your comment about surviving this last year through the drought. But I guess the basic comment is, so we're all singing off the same song sheet. Is it in general true that hemp uses less water, hemp uses less herbicides and pesticides, and is a more sustainable crop?
Those are all really good questions, and they're all questions that I've been, trying to answer on my own farm because I want to make sure this is true too. As far as the herbicides and pesticides, we can monocrop this crop just like we do every other crop. We can spray it all, just like we do with every other crop. I think it's really important, the message of using regenerative practices, which really are just indigenous practices. That's what they are. The way that this land has always been tended. And we need to go back to that. And I think hemp is a great opportunity for us to move forward with agriculture away from the pesticides and the herbicides and more farming like Steve Groff does. He's doing it at a large scale. I'm doing this at a small scale. I only have a 13-acre farm. But it's important for everything in between, I think, as far as the herbicides and pesticides go. I don't use them on my farm. I plant flowers. I use nature as a companion so that the things that bother my plants as far as insects go, they're more interested in the other things around me in the environment. There's diversity available for those things. And as far as weeds, I also use cover crops. So that helps keep the weed pressure down and more companion planting. As far as water, great question. Does it use less water? Yeah, if you plant it at the right time in the right place. I have even seen, my hemp in the Midwest and north central Illinois, the best stands are the ones that come up that overwintered, that were basically treated like a cover crop. So if you have your plant in the ground early enough and you have enough annual rainfall, in Illinois, I think it's like 48 or 50 inches, maybe Carla knows, or at least where I am in the north part of the state. We have enough average rainfall. And if those plants, if those seedlings are coming up, I have volunteers coming up that have been coming up since February, and it's still snowing in Illinois. Now and I've also had some minor flooding in my field because we had a lot of rain recently. Those plants are still looking pretty good because my plants have cover crops. They're not bare in the ground. There's mulch. There's living soil.
We're close to the Oscars music, so maybe really quick responses from Larry, Terry, Corbett.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question, Patrick. I firmly believe you need to have the data to back up these statements, and I think we've heard that from multiple people here through the conference. What I want to say in New York, our problem is too much water. So again, we can make that comment about does hemp use less water? I need to know in New York, does hemp tolerate flooding? Because that's our problem. So think about it regionally as well. I just want to say, I think we are moving towards a regulatory environment where farmers are going to continually lose pesticides. And you could talk to Carla about that. I'm sure she will echo that statement. But we are innovative, and our weed scientists are coming up with non-chemical based methods for weed control, whether it's robotic, mechanical weeding, electric weeding, laser guided, optical vision weeding. These tools are in pre-commercial to commercial scale right now. I think we in the hemp industry need to be testing those machines right now. They're expensive because they're at the pilot scale, but I think that's the type of technology that we're moving to in agriculture in general. And if we can adopt those non-chemical weed management tools early, it will set hemp above some of the other crops.
We're in the red. Terry, soundbite. Corby, soundbite.
I'll just briefly say, I agree that we're all on the same song sheet, but the little that I know is that, there's music sheets on the same song sheet. Some people is for guitar, there's, a line for drums, there's one for trumpets. I kind of feel like that we're all on the same song sheet, but we're all kind of playing different instruments. And I feel like we all have to get on sync, really, to kind of get into the right harmony. You mentioned cotton, and I really believe like there's the cotton standardization, of the cotton fibers, and I think we need to work together for like a standardization of hemp fiber, and we can all get on in unison and get in the same harmony to figure out those standards. I think it'll help the industry.
It all comes back to economics, the input costs and profitability for growers. Every acre needs to be profitable. And as far as pesticides goes and whatnot, I think we're going to see more and more pest pressure as more acres are out there. It's just common to believe that. And along with that, as far as moisture and all that, there's dry land, there's rain-fed agriculture, and there's irrigated, and timely rains mean a lot for most crops in most areas.
Thank you. Round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, guys.
All right, so there you go. You heard that panel discussion. Eric Singular is still here, and I thought we could catch up a little bit and just find out what it is you're doing in the industry these days, because I know you have a lot of interest. You've been, I don't know, I see you at hemp events all over the place, and I value your opinion and perspective. So what are you up to lately?
Yeah, I definitely keep my hands in a lot of pies, but I think there's a common thread between all of them, and it really is building markets for industrial hemp and other climate smart raw materials. And while my focus and passion has been in industrial hemp for the last 6 years, getting so involved in hemp has actually opened up some new avenues and new ideas about other crops too, other emerging climate smart crops that are starting to make their way here into the United States, which has been really exciting.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about that in Colorado. We were talking about flax. And Are you comfortable talking about flax here on a hemp show?
I would love to talk about flax on a hemp show.
All right, because you sort of proposed the idea, like maybe I don't know, how would you tell me the idea?
Sure. So I've worked I've worked across the industrial hemp supply chain. I started in seed and genetics. I've worked a lot with farmers and in the actual production stages. I've later on worked more in processing, and that's something I'm happy to be doing a little bit more of now. But I also worked kind of in the market analyst data role for a little while there with New Frontier. And one of the things that I kind of learned through this experience in hemp is to always be aware of the higher level category that you're a part of. It's easy to get so enthusiastic about something that you can't see the forest for the trees. And I think that hemp definitely has that effect on some people. But hemp is also part of a crop category that is worth considering as well. If you're going to get really excited about hemp, it's worth getting excited about the other bast fiber crops as well. And, one that's kind of really, really similar to hemp is flax. And I think, the Europeans kind of realized this, a couple decades ago, that if you're building processing infrastructure for flax, whether it be for fiber or for flax seed, for crushing, you're building the same infrastructure for hemp. And I actually had the pleasure of going over and visiting some of these flax scutchers that are working with hemp now in Western Europe. And it was just really eye-opening to see, this isn't hemp or flax. This is hemp and flax.
Here in the U.S., we don't have really any infrastructure for hemp or flax, and we have the opportunity to build both. And what you're saying is we can build them together.
Well, it's definitely true from a fiber perspective. But if you look kind of at historical crop footprint in the United States, there's a reason why the Dakotas and Minnesota
industrial hemp
have been kind of an early adopter for industrial hemp. And it's because they have that kind of the growers there are very accustomed to growing specialty crops, and they've been working. That's the kind of the flax seed hub of the United States is up in that upper Midwest. And it's interesting to see you have someone like Roger Gushus and Healthy Oilseeds who's been contracting for flax production for quite some time. And when that 18 Farm Bill passed, it was really easy for him to go to that grower of that network of flax growers and say, hey guys, who would be interested in growing some hemp seed?
Yeah.
So it was an easy plug in there. And then as you start to see all of this investment in hemp fiber processing, I think that what people are starting to realize is it's actually investment in bast fiber processing, and it doesn't just have to be hemp straw that they're working with or contracting for.
All right, Eric Singular, thank you so much. It's great to talk to you again.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so just before we go, just that last thing he was talking about, how, natural fibers, bast fibers, and how it's not really just about hemp. And for me, hemp is a symbol of what agriculture can do, right? Of course, I support the hemp industry and I want to see it flourish. But again, it's a symbol of the important role that agriculture must play in our climate change mitigation strategy. Okay, anyway, my name is Eric Herlock. I'm the senior digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. Get yourself a subscription to our print edition. It'll blow your mind. If you need to reach me for any reason, and I encourage you to reach out, you can send an email directly to me. Send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, and I will get it, and I will reply. And if you've written to me and I haven't replied, well, I'm working on it. All right. Anyway, until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Diamond Communications family. Today's show is written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Harlock, with some production help from Matt Lee. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.